where I can give some tips on how to survive during this, what I like to call remote teaching. I really don't think it's online teaching. It's really remote teaching, and I've seen recently that people have been putting the word emergency in front of it. And so that's really what I view it as. I view it as emergency remote teaching. It's my philosophy that it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of time to develop a really good online course, and there's no way it can be done in a week or in 2 days or whatever some of the time frames are that people have been given to do it. I think there's just no way. And I think what people have to do is just recognize that everybody is going to be doing this remotely in some way, shape, or form. I've been texting with my sister back and forth. My nephew's in 8th grade. Their whole system went down this morning. She couldn't get in. Nobody could get in. She said, fortunately, it didn't last very long. But everybody from kindergarten through graduate school is now in some form of remote teaching. And I think there are some things that we can do to help get everybody through, and some ways that will make it a little bit better. And so what I wanted to do today is just talk about some of the tips that I think might help you. Please feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'll try to address them as I can and stuff. What I wanted to start with, okay, let's see, is a quote from, okay, my screen is not, it's not, there we go, is a quote from J.R. Tolkien, which says, "I wish it need not have happened in my lifetime. In my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf. And so all live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." I don't think any of us planned on this. I don't think any of us would want this again. It's pretty scary time. I'll tell you, I just found out that a woman in my building up on the 4th floor was diagnosed and is in the ICU. So that's adding a little bit of anxiety at the moment. But I think all that we can do is really just do what we can do. In this new world, there are a few things that came to mind as I've been talking to colleagues and doing some trainings. These are uncharted times. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen or when. And I don't know why, but if you remember the TV show One Day at a Time, the lyrics to their theme song came in to my head, that the best we can do is muddle through one day at a time. I've given a link to the full lyrics if you want to. I think one thing that's been positive is that we've seen a lot of really positive response from publishers, from libraries who have given us access to materials, which I think will make it easier. It certainly is interesting to see how that is going on. I know some schools are a little bit ahead of the curve, seem to be worried a little bit more about the care of students and faculty, some not so much. And if you're on Twitter or on Facebook, I'm sure you've seen some of the comments that people have posted. Some of them, I'm like, I don't know what some of these people are thinking about, but it seems to me they're going a little bit overboard. I came up with some new rules that, although I don't really know that they're necessarily new rules, but here are what I think are the rules for interacting and behaving. That I think we first of all have to take care of ourselves and others, which means we need to be nice to each other, including our students. I know that some students were registered for this, and I'm happy to have you here. I'm going to try to give some specific pointers for students, but mostly these rules and other things are going to apply in all situations. It's not just faculty that need to do this. I think that one of the biggest things that we can do is communicate, communicate, and communicate. Faculty need to be communicating with students, letting them know what we're doing, how things are going to work. We need to communicate as we hear from the administration about things that are changing or about how to access the services on campus. Students need to communicate with their faculty members and let us know what's going on, particularly if you run into some kind of situation where you need even more exceptions or flexibility or extensions or whatever. We don't know what's going on in your life. I mean, we can assume to some degree because it's going on in our lives as well. I mean, we have children, we have parents, we have to take care of that. We're trying to move to remote learning. We're trying to figure it all out and having to do it pretty much on the fly. So I think communication and being nice to each other will go a really long way to making it a little bit better, a little bit easier. And I'm not saying easy, I'm saying easier sort of thing. If you watch the news, as I said, I live outside of Washington, D.C. Our public transportation is now limiting it to just essential jobs. They're saying you have to, they're closing off the first and the last rail cars to try and protect their employees. Grocery stores are putting up those plastic barriers to go between clerks and customers. So everybody is just trying to kind of figure it out, which means our third point is we really need to be flexible. I think for faculty, we also need to be transparent about what we're doing, about how we're going to manage the classroom, transparent about things that we don't know how to do or that we're not sure of. We're not sure if some of the rules apply to all classes or if they only apply to certain classes, because faculty are not making those decisions. Those are coming out of the administration. And I think for faculty, it's okay not to know everything. And I think in this situation, sometimes I don't think I know much of anything. But I think we also need to let students know that this is new, that we don't really know what's going on, that we're learning it along with you, and that I think ultimately we'll all get through it. But I think it's understanding that it's difficult for everybody and stuff. Okay, let's see if we'll go to the next one. Here are some of my other rules. That one thing I would recommend is being really cautious with media, that we want to be careful how much we consume. For students, I think it's a really good time to learn how to look at media and popular press in a really scientifically literate way. I listen to some of the things that come out and it's like, that doesn't make sense. So we want to apply psychology to what we know is going on. And what we know is that deals with control. We know what psychology teaches us about coping. We know what psychology teaches us about problem solving, what it teaches us about resilience. And so if we can apply what we know from psychology, then I think we can weather this a little bit better than otherwise. Does that make sense to people? Yes, no?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And then
Yes.
if we go on, I think the other thing is being patient, patient, patient. And I will say that this is not my strong suit. Patience has never been my strong suit. And I'm learning to be a whole lot more patient. The LMSs like Canvas and Blackboard and everything else are getting overloaded. They're moving much more slowly than they normally move. Things like internet, and we're hoping mine doesn't go out because it's not wired. It's Wi-Fi, because I don't have a long enough cord. Couldn't get to the store to get a long enough cord given what's going on. So we're going with the Wi-Fi and hoping that it works. So I think that we need to really be patient with ourselves when things seem like they aren't working. We need to be patient with our students, with other faculty members, and probably even patient with some of the administrators who are also having to deal with a lot of things that they never really planned to. I suspect that if anything like this ever happens again, that administrations will be much better at dealing with them. And then I think the other thing is really to manage our expectations, both our own and everyone else's. And this has to do with expectations about what can you do, how much can you get done. You can't do everything. You can't get everything done all at once. And, you know, it sort of dovetails with the be patient idea that many of us think, and I think sometimes in psychology, because we learned a lot of this stuff, we think that we should be able to be resilient all of the time, that we should know how to cope. And I think we have to have expectations that this is not a normal situation. And so we're not having normal expectations. We need to figure out what else is going on and how we can deal with it. Okay. We're transitioning, as I mentioned before, into remote learning. And this slide is probably as much for faculty as others. Faculty are not designing an online course. And so I think that the focus needs to be on the basics. I think that good teaching is good teaching, and we know what good teaching is from the research. And I think that we do need to ask questions and, again, be patient. And Jeffrey said that we're all still human and that the psych background just gives us a leg up. It does give us a leg up, but sometimes I wonder, sometimes I sit there and I go, I don't really understand this. I just actually had texted my sister. I had the news on before I signed on here, and the governor of Maryland has put a stay-at-home order into effect starting tonight, which means that there are a few businesses that had been allowed to stay open and they're not going to. And they were just showing pictures of a Home Depot where the lines are all the way around the building like twice. Now, I'm not sure what people are in line between 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock that they can get at Home Depot. So it's sort of interesting and stuff. And I'm sitting there, and my sister said, why are they doing that? And I'm going, I really don't know. Unless people, because the governor was actually pretty specific. He said that if you get a plumbing leak, you could go buy plumbing supplies, but you can't go order cabinets, you can't go buy new carpet, you can't do that kind of stuff because that's not necessary, that's not essential. So the only thing I can assume is that people have decided to do home improvement projects or garden or whatever, and they're there to get the stuff before they're not allowed to go out of their house. But I was telling my sister, we know a lot from psychology, but we don't know everything. And some of this is just kind of taking guesses at why things are going and stuff. But I do think that we have to apply what we know and apply what we know to this remote learning. And we also know that people and students, when they get anxious, anyone, when they get anxious, is going to have a harder time doing stuff. And so we have to be patient with that. We have to take that into account. I think it's important that we really pay attention to taking care of each other at this point, and not, I think it's important to cover some content, but frankly, and I told somebody this, I said, our governor has declared that fourth-year medical students and fourth-year nursing students who are scheduled to graduate in May can go ahead and start working in the medical field. So this is the end of March, and so they still have theoretically 6-8 weeks to go. So they must not think there's that much more that they're going to learn in those 6-8 weeks. If you're on a regular term, like the 15-16 week term, then I think we sort of have to think about what are the most basics that we really want them to take away. Kevin, thanks. I don't think in the state of Maryland you can find paper products or disinfectant anywhere. It's almost all of the stores have been out of that for quite a while. So I don't know what they're buying at Home Depot. Hopefully some news reporter will go find out what's going on and let us know. But I just thought it was really interesting as this was going on, sort of thing. And stuff. So I think that we really want to focus on the basics. We want to think about what we're doing. And I think not requiring tons and tons of what I call busy work. needs to be done. I think we really need to rethink some of what we do. I think it's going to be interesting to see, Kelsey, I would agree, every place that I know of in this area around me, outside of Washington, D.C., has been on a mask for weeks. So I don't think there's any left. And I think our governor is and most schools around here have donated all of their science protective gear to local hospitals. So it's kind of interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see what we cover at the end of this whole event. If we rethink what we really think is important. Can't know that, but in those odd moments, I'm sitting there going, I wonder what effect this might have long term. Be interesting to see. Might be a research project for a student to think about. Here are my principles of good practice online, and I took these when I do training for faculty on how to teach online. These are some of the points, but I've sort of modified them a little bit. First of all, you need to know yourself, your strengths and your likes. I do think that every faculty member should be trained to teach online. And I've been biting my tongue not to say to the administration, I told you so, because I don't really think that they would appreciate that. But I think that everybody needs to be trained, because we've had hurricanes, we've had blizzards where things were closed for 2 weeks. And if faculty were trained to do it, even if they're not doing it, it would make things a little bit easier. So if you know yourself and your strengths are not in making videos and being on camera, then don't make videos. Record a little podcast type message. It's not where everybody is expected to do everything. I think we have to maximize the advantages of the medium. And I think some of the advantages of the online environment are it can be asynchronous very easily. And I have actually found that I get deeper discussion answers from students in the online environment because they have time to think. They're not sitting in front of the classroom and asking, and I ask a question and then I want an instant answer. They have time to think about their answers. And I was looking at one of my classes, a discussion that's due tomorrow, and there's some really in-depth answers there. And this is the first week of this class. And so I haven't finished training them in how to do the discussion boards. Kelsey's right, the audience pressure is removed. And when you require all students to participate in the discussion boards, then you get everybody participating. Some are still not going to be great, but it gives those students who may not want to speak out in class a chance to actually share their thoughts. You do have to be a little careful on how you structure the discussion prompts. We don't want it to be confession central. But you can require application and analysis and those sorts of skills where you can actually get a really good discussion going. Keep it simple and as accessible as possible, meaning be careful with things like color and font and including lots of pictures and videos that aren't captioned. Another accessibility issue right now that we have talked about in a number of settings is not all students who are now being forced to go online have access to good internet or some kind of tablet or computer. Many do, but not all. And while many internet providers have offered their packages of basic internet free for the next 2 months, students have to apply for that and they have to qualify for it with, and I'm assuming that's some kind of income qualification or something. I don't really know what it is. But I'm suspecting that some of them are still not going to qualify even for that free internet. So keeping it simple means you can do it via internet, via email, you could do it via text. So it's really thinking about it, and that's why keeping it flexible without diminishing core learning. There are things like Google Voice where you can text and not share your phone number with students. There are other things such as GroupMe that students can do on their phones in a text session. Technology does not equal pedagogy. Technology simply gives us another way to deliver the pedagogy. When we had overheads, that was not pedagogy. That was just a tool. When we had film strips that you used to have to thread through the film projectors. That wasn't pedagogy. That was just early technology that helped make things a little more interesting. So I think that we have to think about some of those sorts of things. And we want to model behavior for students so that they understand what our expectations are. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, which I know that's the purpose of this, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions, comments so far. Okay, let me.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, here's some of my tips on how to survive, and this has to do with not just surviving. Oh, busy work. Martha, I think a lot of faculty, I know sometimes when I'm teaching face-to-face classes, I will do activities because we have to have so many points for what we call class participation. And I use activities, if they're in the classroom, we do them and they get it checked off and they contributes to their points. I have more than they need or more than they can use for the total points. So if class activities are 200 points, we'll have 300 points worth of activities. So if they miss one, it doesn't matter. Some of them I really sort of think are not essential. I use the term busy work loosely. There are things that they can survive without doing. It makes the face-to-face class interesting. And a lot of times at the community college, we do classes that are like 3 hours long. So you really need a whole series of different types of things because you can't lecture for 3 hours, or at least I can't. And I can't come in and show a 2-hour film every week. That's sort of like not using class time in a very productive way. So sometimes we come up with these activities which could help them understand some of the concepts, but I think we can get to the core concepts that we really want them to understand in other ways. Does that help?
That does. Thank you. It kind of makes you think, on the one hand, is it activities that in face-to-face and you have a time allotted and you get them involved with other people in the room versus is it really busy work that you should get rid of in any case, whether it's face-to-face or not?
Yeah, and that's why I'm wondering how, if people are moving to the online in a thoughtful manner, what are you going to do when you go back to the face-to-face classroom? I don't use a lot of like little activities in my online classrooms. I use primarily discussion boards that require them to take the concepts from one, sometimes 2 chapters and apply them in sort of mini essays. And then they have to respond to each other, commenting on the actual discussion board content, not just, oh, that was a great answer, they don't get points for that. That's lovely, but that's not, affirmation is not points. So that there are, and I've actually moved to where I have fewer of them. I used to have 1 for every chapter or 1 or 2 for every week. And then I found I just wasn't getting a lot of really thoughtful, deep answers. So now I try to make it so that I'm applying more than 1 concept in the discussion board, and so that they have to bring in more than, like, it's not a right or wrong answer. There are many ways to approach it, so that they're spending the same amount of time as we require from the Department of Education in order to grant the credits. It's just they spend it in a little bit different way. I've changed some of what I do in my face-to-face classes. Some of it's a little bit harder, but I've actually done some of those discussions in class in groups, where they're spending more time discussing one thing than the other. So it's you know, I mean, how you teach in the pedagogy is always constantly evolving, but if you have, and I told our faculty when I was doing some training in my department, you know, if you have them doing 20 activities to earn the activity points, you need to cut that out for the move to the remote online teaching, because it's not going to work, especially when students don't have access to the internet and the LMS and they're having to do things on their phone. So you kind of have to think about that. Somebody who signs up to teach to take a fully online class really should have access to a tablet or a computer. But what we're dealing with now, and I think we have to keep that in mind, is that most students didn't sign up to do a fully online class. And so they're doing this on the fly just like we are. So that's sort of it. These are some of the tips that I've given to people about how to survive all this. First of all, I think, and psychologists who are clinical, and if you look at the APA stuff and the other information that's out there, this is really just pretty much what's there. It's mimicking that we need to keep a schedule. You want to keep your life as, quote, normal as possible, which means, and I told my sister this, he needs to get up, my nephew needs to get up at the time he normally gets up. He needs to do whatever it is he does in the morning. And then he has school time, and then he has lunch time and so forth, so that keeping the schedule as normal as possible. That kind of is difficult when you're working from home. And I will say that because I've been teaching primarily online, I work from home a lot. But this is different than when I'm just my regular work from home. When I'm working from home, normally I can go out for lunch, or I can go get a cup of coffee at Starbucks or whatever. Can't really do that. So, but I think keeping a schedule so that, like on Sunday, I didn't really spend a lot of time online because I don't normally spend a huge amount of time online on Sunday. So I'm trying to keep, and I said, no, because you can work 24/7 when you're teaching online, and the students are always there. And for students, it's the same thing. All of a sudden, all your work is there. You need to not be constantly working. So you need to figure out a schedule and keep it as normal as possible. Make lists. Right before we started this, I was making a list of exactly what I need to do tomorrow. I'm a big list maker. I also find if I don't make lists, I sometimes forget something I had decided to do. So I think if you make a list, you can then prioritize what's the most important thing on that list, and you get finished it in your, quote, work time or school time and stuff. You really have to avoid multitasking. If you've got 3 classes, you can't have 3 tabs open trying to deal with all 3 classes at the same time. I've tried that. It doesn't really work. We know the research from psychology is very clear that multitasking doesn't work. And so we have to do that. I think we have to remember that this is only temporary. I know it doesn't feel like it, especially as they extended things to the end of April, and now they're talking June, although it's kind of hard to know really what they're looking at. But it is temporary. It will pass. And then I think we have to remember for both students and faculty that tone matters. So when we deal with students, we want to pay attention to the tone of what we're posting, what we're emailing. Students should do that as well. Recognize that your faculty are overwhelmed as well. All of a sudden, they're having to move 3 or 4 classes online that they never had to do. Wow, September. Wow. Canada is really going all in. Okay. Right now we're April 30th. I told my sister that I wouldn't count on him getting back in school this semester. So, but I think our officials and school superintendents and stuff are trying to do it so that it is smaller doses. I think they think if they said September or even online this summer that they might scare people off. I've heard rumors, for instance, that they're talking about all of our summer school classes being online, although the administration's not said anything. So I'm not convinced that everything will get back when it's supposed to. But right now we're ending April 30th. I think that's going to be pushed back. They're just putting a thing up on the news that there's a rush on stores ahead of Maryland's stay-at-home order. I don't know what people are getting. I don't know. It's just crazy. But I think we do have to pay attention to tone and for everybody. Okay. Now, this is a quote from Dr. Ali Mattu. Everybody should just do the best they can. We can grow from this. If you don't know Ali, he is a clinical psychologist who has a show on YouTube called The Psych Show, That Psych Show, The Psych Show, That Psych Show. He's also been posting a lot of videos about dealing with the pandemic, with mental health. He has one that he posted for seniors at any level, 8th grade seniors, in high school, college seniors, talking about the feelings. They're fairly short. He's I really like his stuff. I have to, full disclosure, I've known him since he was a graduate student at Catholic University. And but if you go on to YouTube and look for his stuff, this comes from one of his videos, and so forth. And I think that I like watching his stuff. It's fairly laid back. Of course, it's all from home now, and stuff. But he's got a lot of good points, and I love this one, that everybody should just do the best they can, that we can grow from this, and and psychologists like to think of everything as a growth opportunity. So if we change our mindset, then maybe it won't be quite so bad. And I'm not saying that mindset's going to always stay, because I think it's not. I mean, I think you're going to go through moments back and forth, but we just kind of have to do the best that we can. I wanted to share, when I'm doing online training for faculty and doing presentations, I always go back to the 7 principles of good practice in undergraduate education from Chickering and Gamson, and I hope that most faculty are familiar with these. I think it's good for students to see them as well, that really good practice in whether it's face-to-face or whether it's online is encouraging contact between students and faculty, and that goes back to that whole communication thing. When people don't know what's going on, that's when it gets to be a problem. Most people will have some understanding if they understand what's going on. If you tell them what's going on, they will be more accepting. It's when people don't know what's going on, and we all start thinking about what's the worst thing that's going on, what's happening. We don't know what's going on. Everything is really scary. Whereas if we know what's going on, then we can deal with it. We want to develop reciprocity and cooperation among students. This is a great time to have students doing group projects. They can do them via text. They could call each other. So there are lots of ways to have them doing that. We do want to encourage active learning. And I know the phrase active learning is overused, but what I view active learning as, let's take those concepts and see if we can apply them. I do think we want to be cautious about making students, and I saw something on Twitter today, I think it was, from some students saying, please stop making us apply principles to the current situation. And I think that's probably a valid point. While we think that we could apply a lot of psychological principles to what's going on, I don't know if always dwelling on that is necessarily the best thing. I think down the road we may want to come back to some of that, but it might be nice to have a break from some other sorts of topics, or give them a choice of what they want to write on, so that if they really want to analyze this, then analyze that, and stuff. We do emphasize time on task, that it does take a certain amount of time to learn and to do this work, and we know that the Department of Education has said there are certain number of hours that you need. I haven't seen them decrease that yet, but there are lots of ways we can ask them to spend the time on task. We want to keep our expectations high. Students should keep the expectations of their own work high. This is going to end, and at some point students are going to want to do something, either get a job, go on to graduate school, and we don't want to let the learning go by the wayside, because that ultimately will hurt you in the long run. A lot of schools are moving to pass-fail option for this semester, but we don't want to have a lot of students going on the low end, just because I think that they can still learn and do things. And we want to respect diverse talents and ways of learning, and that is not learning styles. My faculty know that I absolutely hate when people start talking about learning styles. They were doing that in a division meeting, and I stood up, our dean, who is not a psychologist, and I stood up, I'm like, excuse me, now I got to stop this right now. So, and I had to share some of the research. So, but there are ways to cover topics, allow students to do something other than just a research paper. Perhaps I've had students do presentation. Well, I had an honor student last term go to the counseling center. It was a health psychology class, and he worked with the counseling center, and he did a brochure about the counseling center to appeal to students at the school, because the counseling center was not being used as much as it should have. And my thought was that students, A, don't know it's there, B, don't know they can use it, C, don't know what they do. So as a student, he was able to communicate more from the student perspective. And so he had to base it on research. I mean, he didn't just get to design a brochure. But, there are things like that that students can do where they can show us that they're still learning, and communicate the concepts and the topics and the other sorts of things without always doing a research paper. I get really tired of reading research papers myself. But so when I talk about respecting diverse talents and ways of learning, I think that's one of the things we have to think about. Does anybody have any other suggestions on things that you've done that might tap into like the diverse talents thing? Okay.
Student talking here, but I know I had an advanced AbSpsych class last term, and one of the things that he actually did that I really loved is that about halfway through the term we had to do a art project that represented some different part of mental health and disorders. There were some really kind of interesting viewpoints that we got, some beautiful stuff. Me and two of my coworkers, students did improv because of the fact that nobody really understood what that was. And it was a process that we said that if you're in counseling, you're going to need to be able to improv sometimes. So thinking on your feet kind of process. But I think that was a really interesting way for all of us to kind of think outside of the box about how to represent things.
Good. Yeah. And I think that because most computers have a webcam, because you can record things and make small videos and so forth without having to have a lot of equipment, students can do things like that now much more easily than in the long ago days when they would have to make an appointment with whatever the video place at the campus was and make the video and stuff. Jeffrey, I agree that sometimes asking them, how would you like to demonstrate this learning to me, is one way to do it, especially because I know a lot of people are really worried about cheating online with tests. I do have to say, and I'm sure that I've had some cheating in my classes, my online classes and on the exams, because I know the test banks are all out there. But when I look overall at the grades on most of my online tests, they are pretty good correlation with the rest of the work in the course. So I think at this semester, particularly with how things are going, gives an opportunity to involve the students more in their own learning. I think that's one thing with online is that students really end up having to take more responsibility for their own learning because you're not up there talking all the time. I actually have no videos of me lecturing in my classes, which I know when I'm watching all the stuff on Twitter and Facebook and everything else, I don't like to make them. I have an introductory video that I did on YouTube that I put in the class so they can see me and hear me talk. I'm not sure they watch them, and I'm not sure it's worth the time and effort to do that. I don't like myself on video, and when I've done them, it takes so long to write out a script so that I'm not stumbling over my words or making errors and so forth. So I actually have no videos of lectures in my class. I do bring in some Khan Academy or some TED Talks that kind of cover some of the same topics. I sort of figure that they can read the textbook. So I don't know that I need to add to that. Now, granted, I'm not teaching at the graduate level. Graduate level might be a little difficult, but I think there are ways to involve them in making some of the decisions. I thought I would include some of what I've seen. I'm calling it best advice from social media. It's my best advice because these are things that I put up there. You need to spend, I think it's more important to spend the time engaging students rather than just designing the course. Design takes a lot of time. And I sort of mentioned some of this before. Go bare bones, tell students why there's not a lot in the course. There's no sense spending a lot of time if this is just temporary. I mean, I saw something today from somebody who's like had spent hours and hours and it took them to make one introductory video. That to me is not the best use of time right now. Pose a question, have students apply the concepts or whatever. I've said this before, if you're transitioning to online, it's critical to communicate with your students often, admit your limits, and I think that goes a long way to easing their anxiety, that they don't expect that they have to be perfect in the online environment. I've created in my classes an open discussion board where students can share resources on coping and the virus. I'm encouraging them to kind of think like a psychologist. Kelsey, when I say bare bones, I don't mean don't cover the content. What I'm meaning is don't try to put in a lot of videos, don't necessarily include a lot of podcasts, and so forth. And this is particularly important for face-to-face faculty moving to online. You mentioned your school was just starting. That's a little bit different than schools that are now like 4 weeks from the end of the semester or 3 weeks from the exam. I suspect that if your classes just started today, people had a little bit of notice so they can begin to do that. You can put things like the PowerPoints from the publisher up. You can find some links. What I see a lot of times from people who are new to online is they cram so much stuff in a class, so many multimedia things, so many resources from outside, links and articles and everything else. It becomes way overwhelming for students. It would become overwhelming for me if I saw that much stuff in a class. So I think the other thing is faculty have to figure out where are they standing right now with their school, with how much time is left, and so forth. Jeffrey, that's what I'm really talking about. Is pick a few things that you can do well. Don't worry about making 45-minute videos for every topic that's left. I mean, that's, first of all, you can probably find videos on the topics out there if you search YouTube and TED Talks. So don't redo the things that are already done. Just spend the energy communicating with the students, helping them understand the concepts, because all of the time, you've only got so many hours for teaching each course. So all of the time that you spend creating the videos, creating podcasts, doing fancy things are just not going to pay off in the end, especially if you're not probably ever going to teach online again. So I think when I say bare bones, it's pick the minimum amount of things that are needed in order to help the students succeed in that course, and don't worry about all the other fluff. And I will say that my online classes, since I first started teaching, there's so much less material in each course than there was when I first began. I had way too much stuff in there. There's no way they were reading it all or looking at it all. And so now I'm much more selective about what I put in there. And I do expect them to look at it because I'm not asking them to look at 6 videos for every module. I've picked one. Occasionally I'll have 2 because I find 2 really good ones on the concepts. But it's really boiling it down to the most essential things. Okay. Now, and then, okay, let's see. And then, and I believe that they will be, the webinar will be posted up on the PsychHigh site or on the PsychHigh site. And what I've got here are a number of resources. I've got a link to the Teaching of Psychology website, the STP website, the online psychology lab at APA. There's an undergraduate psychology research conference. Registration ends April 1st, so you got 2 days left. Dr. Regan Garung from Oregon State had a really lovely blog that he posted about moving online that I think is great. I've included Ollie's link for YouTube, and we've included links for the past webinars and podcasts and blogs and so forth from PsyChi. So what I wanted to do with the few minutes that we have left is see if people had questions or comments or anything else. Oh, Megan, you're welcome. I'm happy to share all of this. I sort of feel an obligation. My Twitter account has been very active in the last couple of weeks. I've had it for over 10 years, and I have almost never posted. I occasionally will retweet something for my students, but this is really the first time in, the 10 years that I've had the account that I've actually posted stuff in there. I just sort of felt obligated because I saw so many people just totally lost. And I am very straightforward, Megan. My colleagues will tell you. I'm fortunate I'm at a point in my career where I can do that. I don't tend to worry as much about, not much can happen to me. I'm tenured. I'm full professor. I've been there long enough that they can't really do much to me. So I kind of feel obligated now to speak up and help those who are newer. And I'm hoping that by having people like me, senior faculty, say these sorts of things, that maybe they'll have, I don't want to call it ammunition, but they'll have some things that they can take to their administrators if they seem to be expecting more than what should be done. Does that sound diplomatic enough?
That sounds diplomatic enough.
Yeah, I'm trying to say, because I've seen some of what our administrators kind of have been putting out. I'm going, oh no. Let's scale it back. If they can't do this, and raising some issues, and they don't seem to know about things like GroupMe or Google Voice or some of those other things. If you have questions, I am on Twitter. It's Dr. F Online. I'm on the STP Face group. So if you join those, hi Mitch, I believe that, and Martha can confirm this, will the PowerPoint be posted as well?
Yes, the whole thing will be recorded, so you'll see the PowerPoint and get the sound and video.
Okay, and if you can't get to it or you miss it, if you just email me, I'm at Prince George's Community College, so if you go to our website, you should be able to find me. It's dfinley@pgcc.edu. Just put in their PsyChi webinar, and I can hopefully set up the email so it doesn't spam those things out, which it sometimes does. I don't know why it spams out messages from the college email accounts, but it does. So I've learned to check my junk mail and stuff, but yeah, I'll be happy to send it, or if you have other questions. And so I tried not to put a lot of specifics about what to do in a classroom. There's a ton of that advice on Facebook and Twitter right now. And I decided to go more with what are some ways to sort of make it through this, and not telling you what I think you should do as you're setting up the online class, other than just go simple, 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 basic, basic, basic. Okay. Other questions or comments or anything?
I think that was helpful about going simple, especially when either people know how much there is to support teaching online, how much great things you could pull together and different platforms you might use. But you commented at one point, if you're not going to be teaching online when you go back anyway, there's sort of that balance between how much time you want to spend on this course and how much time is time lost if you won't use it again.
Yeah, and I think especially for people whose semester is already well into the semester, you got to think about the fact that, you've got 4 weeks left, and, and if you're teaching 3 or 4 classes, you've got to spend that same amount on each class. I think it's better spent communicating with students, and dealing with those kinds of issues. If you want to learn to teach online, there are a lot of places like Quality Matters where you can take workshops. Your own institution may have some training. I do think you need to be trained to teach online. And then you can really develop a course from the beginning as opposed to trying to develop a couple of modules that are fully formed now. That's just not, I mean, I don't think it's possible, frankly. I mean, if you're teaching one course and you want to spend, 40 hours a week doing that, that's great. But I just kind of think there's other stuff to do.
Right. I agree.
And you probably got grading still to do as well. I mean, it's not like you get to stop grading things. So, I mean, go from there. Any other questions or comments or anything?
Just a big thank you for your advice and your thoughts. Really appreciate taking the time to put this on.
Oh, you're welcome. What happened is there was one schedule, and I hope that when she's able to do hers, you'll register for Dr. Hammers. She's chair or head of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Xavier, and she's kind of overwhelmed, as you can imagine. So I offered to do this at the time that it was scheduled so that Psych-Hi still had something sort of thing. And then down the road, she'll be able to do hers. So, but I enjoyed it. I always love talking about online teaching, so. Okay, then if there's nothing else, then I'll just wish everybody good luck and have a good semester and try not to get too stressed. And as I said, this will be up on the Psych-Hi. I don't know how long it takes them to do that. I'm going to click on the recording to stop, and then I'll, yeah, Devorah, I think internships and stuff are going to, and clinicals, that's where there's some real issues. My sister's professor in the doctoral program for physical therapy, and their graduates are going to have to just graduate later because they can't do their clinical hours and they have to have them. So I think, sometimes for some things we're going to have to make some of those adjustments. Some things we can do in a creative way, some things you got to be hands-on. I mean, I frankly don't want a nurse who hasn't actually done clinicals where they've done the the putting the IVs in and the other things, just learning it on a video. So there's some areas where they're actually going to have to do things in person, and that's just going to have to be later than we would have wanted for the term. So, and that's where that flexibility and everything else comes. So, all right. So, as I said, if you have questions, please let me know. And if not, have a great evening and good luck the rest of the term.